Today, we're diving into one of history's most fascinating and, frankly, terrifying figures. Timur. You might know him better as Tamerlane. This is a man who built a colossal empire, but his legacy is this complex, tangled knot of breathtaking beauty and absolute brutality. So let's try and unravel this man of contradictions.
Just let that sink in for a second. The whole expanse of the inhabited part of the world is not large enough to have two kings. This one sentence tells you everything you need to know about his ambition. We're not talking about conquering a neighboring country. For Timur, the goal was everything: total, absolute, unrivaled domination.
So, who was this guy? Where does that kind of world-devouring ambition even come from? You might think he was born into some massive empire, like Genghis Khan's heirs, but not exactly. To really get a handle on the Conqueror, we've got to go back and look at the boy.
All right, so first up, let's explore Timur's incredible, and I mean incredible rise. How he went from a minor noble with a serious injury to a man who would make kings and sultans across the known world tremble.
You see, Timur's beginnings were surprisingly modest. He wasn't born a prince. He came from the Barlas tribe. They had Mongol roots but had adopted Turkic culture. And his early career? Well, let's just say it involved a lot of raiding. He was basically a bandit. And it was on one of these raids that his life changed forever. He took a couple of arrows to his right side, which left him with a permanent dragging limp and a mangled hand. This is where he got his famous name, Timurid, Persian for Timur the Lame. And that name, a mark of his injury, would echo in fear across Europe as Tamerlane.
So how does a lame raider become an emperor? Well, through pure political genius. See, in the Mongol world, there was one golden rule. You couldn't be the great Khan unless you were a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. And Timur wasn't. So what did he do? He found a brilliant loophole. He married a princess who was a direct descendant, Sarai mu Khanum, and then he took on the title Garrigan, which means royal son-in-law. It was a masterstroke. He couldn't be the king, so he became the king's family, ruling through his connection to the great man's lineage.
Okay, so he's got his Mongol legitimacy sorted, but that was only one piece of the puzzle. To build the kind of empire he dreamed of, Timur knew he had to win over the vast Muslim world he was about to try and conquer.
So he crafted this new public image. He presented himself as a Ghazi, a holy warrior for the faith. He adopted the title Sword of Islam. It was an incredible piece of branding, right? It framed his conquests not as simple power grabs, but as some kind of divine mission. But the real question is, was this genuine faith? Or was it just the most calculated PR move in history?
And this is where we run smack into his first huge contradiction. Because for all his talk of being the Sword of Islam, many of his most savage, most devastating campaigns were waged against other powerful Muslim empires. He went to war with the Mamluks in Egypt and Syria, he absolutely shattered the Ottoman Empire, and he dismantled the Golden Horde. So what does that tell you? It shows his title was, above all, a political tool, a justification for war, no matter who the enemy was.
And make no mistake, this political savvy was backed by a military machine of terrifying efficiency and, yes, terrifying brutality. This is the reality that defines the darkest, most infamous part of his legacy.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's breathless. Over the course of 30 years, he just sweeps across Asia like a force of nature. Persia, Russia, India, Anatolia, entire empires just crumbled before him. His victory over the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I at Ankara in 1402 was so shocking it sent waves all the way to Europe. For a hot minute, some European kings actually saw this terrifying conqueror as a potential ally against the Turks.
But his methods, they were on another level of horrifying. Before his assault on the city of Delhi, Timur's army had captured about 100,000 slaves. He was worried that, during the chaos of battle, they might rise up and attack his army from behind. So he gave a single, chilling order: execute every single one of them.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just random, chaotic violence. It was strategic terror, designed to send a message. When the Persian city of Isfahan rebelled, Timur decided to make an example of them that no one would ever forget. An eyewitness reported that his soldiers were ordered to build towers out of the severed heads of the city's inhabitants. Not one tower, more than 24 of them.
The estimated death toll in Isfahan alone might have been as high as 200,000 people. It's almost impossible to comprehend. But in his mind, there was a twisted logic to it.
He believed that if he was so terrifying, so utterly ruthless, other cities would simply surrender without a fight, which he argued would actually prevent more bloodshed in the long run.
Now, take a deep breath, because it's almost impossible to reconcile that level of destruction with what comes next. We're about to pivot hard to the other side of Timur, the side that gave birth to a golden age of art and culture. Because in the middle of these horrific massacres, Timur had this one very peculiar policy. He gave orders to systematically spare certain people: the artisans, the architects, the scientists, the scholars, the craftsmen. And he didn't just spare them, he rounded them up from every single city he conquered and had them all deported back to his capital. So, think about it. He took the collective genius of Persia, Syria, and India, and he focused it all on one place, his capital, Samarkand. He filled his court with the greatest minds of the age, like the famous historian Ibn Khaldun, and he transformed the city into one of the most magnificent on earth. This explosion of culture, all of it funded by his conquests, became known as the Timurid Renaissance. But why? Why would such a brutal conqueror invest so much in art and beauty? Was it a genuine appreciation, or was it the ultimate power move, proving that he could not only destroy civilizations, but he could build a new, more glorious one from their best and brightest minds?
And this leads to one of the most amazing stories about him, one that shows this completely different side. He summoned the great Persian poet Hafez. Now, Hafez had once written a poem saying he'd trade the great cities of Samarkand and Bukhara for the mole on his lover's cheek. So Timur, half joking but also half serious, says to him, "With my sword I've conquered most of the world to build up my cities, and you would sell them for a mole." And Hafez, without missing a beat, bows and says, "It is by such generosity that I've been reduced to my present state of poverty." Timur just burst out laughing. He was so delighted by the witty comeback that he showered the poet with gifts.
So there you have it, the butcher of Isfahan and the patron of Samarkand, the man who built towers of human skulls and the man who debated poetry with scholars. How on earth are we supposed to make sense of his legacy? Well, the simple answer is it completely depends on who you ask. In modern Uzbekistan, Timur is a national hero. He's seen as the great unifier, the father of the nation. His statue literally replaced Karl Marx's in the capital after the fall of the Soviet Union. But you go to the lands he ravaged, Persia, India, the Arab world, and he is remembered as a genocidal monster. His historical reputation is split right down the fault lines of his conquests. And what about his empire? Well, politically, it didn't last long. It basically shattered soon after he died in 1405. But his cultural and dynastic footprint, that was immense. The unique Turco-Persian culture he championed blossomed for generations. And get this, centuries later, his great-great-great-grandson, a guy named Babur, would be driven out of Central Asia and go on to found another legendary empire in India, the Mughals.
Which brings us back to that central, nagging question. So, who was the real Timur? Was he a genocidal warlord, a brilliant patron of the arts, a visionary empire builder? The truth, as unsatisfying as it might be, is that he wasn't one of these things. He was all of them. He was a man who could order a citywide massacre in the morning and then spend the afternoon debating philosophy and admiring architecture.
And that leaves us with one last, really unsettling thought. Timur's story forces us to ask a question that echoes all through history. The magnificent turquoise domes and mosques of Samarkand still stand today. They are breathtakingly beautiful, but they were built on a foundation of skulls. So the question is, can a legacy of beauty ever truly outweigh a legacy of blood?